Hello, welcome to another episode of Learn with Lo. I am just loving these Monday meetup series for you guys and kind of putting them in strategically over our lunch hour hopefully allows for a lot of you guys to join and be a part. I love, like I said, any Q&A and interaction that we can get on these calls as well too. So if you ever have any questions as we go through, feel free to pop them into the chat and I can always answer them in real time. And these are always recorded too for anybody that joins us later on or after the fact. They're always posted under the Reels section, and then I do try to upload them to my YouTube channel as well too. So thank you for being here for another episode of Learn with Lo. Super excited to bring you guys, like I said, more education today. If you guys were following along on my stories this morning, you saw how I was taking a little trip down memory lane because it just so happened that I got a Facebook memory. 11 years ago to this day, I was preparing to defend my master's thesis project, which was, I remember, a very nerve-wracking day, a nerve-wracking experience, but I'm just like, oh, look at Lauryn, look at how far she's come. And all of, like I said, taking a lot of that formal education and kind of seeing it really play out. I did my master's thesis project on what we call the incretin hormones, your infamous now GLP-1 and GIP hormones that are part of this whole craze of our weight loss drugs and weight loss peptides. It's like, come to find out, your body actually does produce GLP-1 and GIP on its own, right? So I just felt like was kind of seeing that full wave of things come to light. And those were things that I was studying even 11 years ago as far as graduate programs and master's programs. I was like, oh yeah, I was onto this incretin hormones kick before it was cool, which is awesome. So I just love seeing things like that kind of come full circle, not only for myself personally, but also just in the field of health, wellness, fitness, like professionally too. So very neat to kind of see things come full circle. And if that wasn't an apparent showing of my inner nerd, then I don't know what is. And that's why you guys see such a passion for like education and getting information out there to the masses. And that's such a big pillar of my business is education, mostly because one, have such a passion for it, and two is because I've been in the seat of being opposite of me and being a patient in the current healthcare field where I didn't feel educated. I didn't feel empowered. I felt like it was just another number, another cookie cutter approach, another try this and come back in a year type strategy. And that just didn't sit well with me, right? It's like, I want to know, how does my body work? Why am I experiencing these symptoms? How are these things interconnected more so than anything? So that is such a huge passion and mission of mine with the lowdown, is to create a seismic shift in the healthcare experience where we can not only bring patients along as the forefront and put you in the driver's seat versus having you feel like, just like I said, just another number, just another cookie cutter, like next, and not really getting that support and education and empowerment from your provider as more, they should be more of your guide while you're in the driver's seat, right? So you always get to have that full freedom and autonomy. And so contrary, unfortunately, to like other healthcare experiences and other healthcare practitioners, I don't think everybody always comes together to view it as holistic care or holistic medicine. And when I spell out holistic, I mean like WHOLE, like taking into account the whole person. And to me, that is vitally important, right? So we hear terms like integrative care and functional medicine. Like integrative care is treating the person as a whole. Functional medicine is someone that's devoted to finding the root cause, right? So it's both, right? It's what I do is very much integrative care and is very much also what is the root cause of all of this integration, right? And you just don't see that in conventional medicine, right? And so that's where disease really occurs, is when we start to kind of pull the pieces of the body together, the body, the mind, the spirit, it all becomes disconnected, right? So we end up with all of these seemingly separate symptoms, which is what I kind of want to jump off our conversation today is maybe you experience things like cholesterol issues, high cholesterol or even like low cholesterol, or you've been told that you have low vitamin D, even if you try to like supplement vitamin D. Maybe you have gastrointestinal issues like bloating. Maybe you're struggling with loose urgent bowel movements with that, and you've been diagnosed with like IBS, right? Maybe you have dry, patchy skin, scaly skin. Maybe you have hormone issues or some estrogen dominant symptoms going on, like heavy, painful menstrual cycles. It's like when I hear this, like this is me in a patient intake session, I'm like, where are all of those related together, right? Versus taking this health history and being like, oh, you have cholesterol issues, and we're gonna do this for your cholesterol issues. And then you have vitamin and nutrient issues over here. Oh, and then you're having some bloating and some diarrhea. Okay, we'll do some gut work over here. And then you have some hormone issues, or you have some estrogen dominance, like, oh, okay, well, here, we'll do some hormones over here. It's like, that is not how the body works. That continues to keep the body separate, and it continues to keep the body in this dis-ease situation. The body is really looking to bring this all full circle. So of those examples that I shared, maybe that feels like you're like, yeah, I have had cholesterol issues and vitamin D deficiencies, and I do have bloating, I do have bowel movement inconsistencies, I do have hormonal issues or estrogen dominance, I do have some funky skin stuff. And you're telling me that's all related? When I hear about this, I tend to start to think about some of these undercover culprits, right? And specifically in this scenario, when I hear a lot of those symptoms, I'm immediately thinking bile. Probably not what you thought I was going to say, right? Bile and the gallbladder, right? So when we think about bile and the gallbladder, I know that there's some anatomy lessons that we'll have to kind of walk through here, but I'm going to go out on a limb and say that you probably didn't guess what cholesterol and vitamin D and bloating and diarrhea and scaly patchy skin or hormone imbalances or estrogen dominance had in common. And it does go back to some underlying gut things. I'm not saying that that's like the only root cause, but when I hear about this, I feel like bile in the gallbladder are popping up more and more in my clinical experience. I'm catching it more on blood work, which it's difficult to catch on blood work because normally blood work is the very last signs of dysfunction, which is why so many people get the rigmarole of like, oh, your labs look normal, come back next year. It's like in that setting, they're just waiting for your blood work to catch up with how bad you feel. Blood work is going to be the last place that we spot dysfunction, right? Which is why things like functional gut testing, microbiome analysis, toxin testing, urinary analysis, adrenal testing, like that's why functional medicine uses so many more testing modalities, is because blood work is great and we use it, but we're going to not, like, that's probably not going to be where we find like our root causes at, right? Because it's the last thing that's going to express dysfunction. So in a lot of my functional wellness consults that I've been doing, my initial consult package that I do for individuals, I've been catching a lot more of these inklings of like, I think there's some liver, bile, gallbladder issues potentially going on here. And sure enough, it usually lines up with a lot of their symptoms, right? So let's just back up a notch, because we're going to be talking about like, what is the gallbladder? What is bile? Why is it so important? And why do we feel like this is an organ that a lot of times we only think about the gallbladder when we're going to yank it out? It's like, oh, that seems extreme. I was like, what about catching some early signs of dysfunction, supporting the gallbladder and bile before it becomes an issue of like full-blown gallstones or bile duct issues, right? So contrary to popular belief, we can identify these things early and we can save the gallbladder before it's actually in its full removal stage. If you've already had your gallbladder removed, that is okay. Now we can focus on how we want to manage the system after the fact, which is not just a yank it out, go home and continue your life on its merry way. No, there's definitely some things that we want to do. So let's just high level, take it back a notch. We'll keep it very like 101, like what is the main things you need to know to kind of understand the importance of your gallbladder and bile in terms of your hormones and your daily symptoms. So when it comes to what is a gallbladder, what does it do? So talk about an organ that really kind of gets thrown away, right? It's really kind of deemed, oh, removable and unimportant, kind of like your spleen or like your tonsils. It's like, I'm of the belief that we probably weren't built with a certain organ that was completely disposable and just like, oh, we can just take it out, right? So we know that these things always have a rhyme, a reason, and a season in the body. But it's estimated that 1.2 million people have their gallbladder removed in the US per year. 1.2 million people. I'm like, whoa, that's wild, right? It's such a huge statistic. So once we're kind of taught, though, to appreciate like the vital importance of things like bile and gallbladder function, we'll soon find out that it's far from just a disposable organ. So the gallbladder, if you're not familiar, we have our liver. That's a very large organ on the right side of our body. You have your liver, and then what's a small appendage that hangs off of the liver, almost like a small pear-shaped pouch, is called the gallbladder. So it's an extension of your liver. It hangs off of your liver, and it's more on the right side of the body. The gallbladder is responsible for storing and concentrating a key digestive juice called bile. We'll talk about bile in a second, but kind of thinking about what's the function of the gallbladder, right? So we have the bigger organ, the liver. We have an appendage that hangs off and stores bile in a pouch called the gallbladder. When we consume dietary fats specifically, that's going to trigger the release of a hormone called cholecystokinin, or CCK. That CCK in turn then stimulates the contraction or the squeezing of the gallbladder to release bile into the small intestine so that we can emulsify, a fancy word of saying digest fats, and absorb fat-soluble vitamins, right? So without bile and without the gallbladder, we're going to struggle digesting and absorbing dietary fats, which also means we're going to struggle digesting and absorbing fat-soluble vitamins, A, D, E, and K, right? So sometimes, just because we usually don't measure vitamin A status or vitamin E or vitamin K status, like it's pretty common that we measure vitamin D. And so a lot of times people will kind of recognize it's not that it only affects vitamin D, but most of the time that's what people are getting tested, and they kind of notice, they're like, hey, no matter what I supplement, my doctor always says I'm low in vitamin D. It's like, interesting, we might want to connect this a little bit bigger or a little bit deeper. So when we kind of can now appreciate, okay, we have this whole separate little pouch, this organ that hangs off the liver, it stores and concentrates bile. What's bile, right? It's like, okay, so it helps us digest and absorb fats, like, cool, so what, right? Well, bile is this kind of greenish fluid that is produced by your liver. It is a mixture of water as well as cholesterol, bilirubin, and bile salts. So we kind of have this little ingredient mashup of what bile consists of, which you can already see. You're like, there's cholesterol in bile? I'm like, yes, there is, which is why a lot of times, like, and I'm not saying that the only reason why someone might have high cholesterol or cholesterol issues is because of bile, but we have to check off some of the big rocks first. I'm talking about, like, I see people all the time where they have a lot of foundations covered. They're eating very well, they're managing stress, they're managing sleep, like, and yet they still have their cholesterol in the 250s, 260s, 270s, 280s, and their doctor wants to put them on a statin. I'm talking about those individuals, not the individuals where we haven't really done the big rocks just yet, right? Diet maybe still needs some work, and like lifestyle and circadian rhythm still needs some work, but I'm talking about, like, this is kind of scratch ahead. Why do I have high cholesterol? I would immediately think bile, right? So we're kind of connecting the dots here. So it's this greenish fluid that's stored, it's created in the liver, it's stored in the gallbladder. Why is bile so freaking important? Well, bile is necessary for really like 4 main categories of function. Number 1, bile is responsible for fat digestion, right? So hence why some people feel really good on higher fat diets like keto and carnivore, right? Some people feel fantastic on those diets. Some people feel like absolute garbage. A lot of that can do with bile acid production, right? Also, when we think about digesting and absorbing fats, we immediately think about blood sugar. If you are not properly digesting and absorbing fats, usually you have more blood sugar dysregulation, right? You have trouble feeling full. You feel like you have a lot of blood sugar lows or blood sugar crashes. You experience hypoglycemia or reactive hypoglycemia, lots of different things, right? I'm like, blood sugar and bile, they're kind of best friends. So we need bile for sure to help absorb fats. Number 2, we need bile for nutrient absorption, specifically those fat-soluble things, right? The vitamins and the minerals that require fat as a transport protein or a transport molecule. I guess it's not a protein, a transport molecule. So vitamin A, vitamin D, vitamin E, vitamin K, those are all fat soluble vitamins. Also things like omega-3s, right? Those are a fatty acid. So if we are supplementing with some of these things, but not necessarily absorbing them, some of that could be bile. Number 3, bile is immensely important in microbiome balance, right? We think about maintaining the balance of good guys to bad guys in our gut. So immensely important for so many things, but poor bile usually causes more dysbiosis patterns. We see lower amounts of good guys, higher amounts of bad guys, and a lot of dysbiosis overgrowths or a higher prevalence of things like SIBO. SIBO also is often misdiagnosed or misrepresented as IBS, right? So you're starting to see where things come together here. You're like, oh, fat soluble vitamins, cholesterol, IBS symptoms, bloating. I'm like, just saying, like connecting the dots here. And then number 4, bile is immensely important in toxin excretion. When I say toxins, you think about anything that comes into the body that wasn't necessarily meant to be there, whether it's like medications or fragrances and plastics and environmental pollutants and mold and mycotoxins, right? The body has a mechanism to bind those things and get them out of the body so that they don't end up in the bloodstream. Hey, bile. Bile is very, very important as a sponge or as an absorptive device for a lot of those toxins. So individuals that are struggling with bile production probably also struggle with overall detoxification, and they might have more struggles getting some of those things out of their body. So that's why we see more of that liver picture, or some people end up with like fatty liver disease because of that as well too. So kind of crazy. When we are thinking about this bile issue, what type of conditions can arise if we're having bile issues? Now, we've already kind of touched on a few of these, but just to kind of like put them all in one spot, or to help you kind of think outside the box a little bit, someone that may be having bile issues could display as those estrogen dominant type symptoms: heavy periods, painful periods or cramping, fibroids, endometriosis, like the things you would be prescribed birth control for, which ironically, so kind of ironic, right? That the estrogen dominance would contribute to poor bile flow. Number 2, we might see issues arise with bile if someone has those chronic low fat soluble vitamins A, D, E, and K. Now, what would this look like if you didn't directly measure vitamin A, D, E, and K? What does this look like? Someone that's low in those vitamins usually has troubles with immune system. Either they feel like they're chronically ill or can't kick when they do get sick. They kind of like really get sick, or they have autoimmune issues. Maybe those individuals have a lot of food sensitivity issues, or they have certain hormone deficiencies too, because vitamin D is very impactful in the synthesis of things like progesterone, estrogen, testosterone. So when I say like low vitamin status, it could show up as immune issues, food sensitivities, hormone imbalances as well too. This can also show up as someone's got issues with bile. It can show up as diabetes, pre-diabetes, kind of figuring out like what that whole blood sugar balance response is, because fats help stabilize that. We can also see bile issues present as hypothyroidism. So thyroid issues. Bile is involved in the conversion of our inactive thyroid hormone T4 into the active form T3. Right? So it's not uncommon that you see things like fatigue, weight gain, hair loss, mood disturbances kind of coincide with some of those thyroid-based symptoms. Whenever I think thyroid, I'm always thinking liver, gallbladder, bile, for sure. I'm not saying that that's always true for everybody, but it's something that we have to absolutely like check and take into consideration when there's a thyroid picture going on. And then last but not least, we'll see a lot of issues with like dysbiosis, such as SIBO, SIFO, candida, or we might see someone that's presenting with non-alcoholic fatty liver. So all of those things, you're like, so you're coming to tell me that all of those things could potentially point back to somebody's inability to produce enough bile, or contract the gallbladder, or maybe the bile is thick, it's viscous. We're starting to get some of those early signs of like gallstone formation, right? It's not functioning well. I'm like, yep, that's what I'm saying. And definitely yanking out the gallbladder is not going to fix any of those things. If anything, it's going to make a lot of those things worse, right? So with so many different functions, right, it should really come as no surprise that problems in like the flow of bile, the metabolism of bile, the synthesis of bile, or bile acids in general could contribute pretty heavily to a variety of different dis-ease states, but yet we're out there separating all of these dis-ease states and trying to treat them all separately, right? It's like, oh, here, go over here for a statin, and then go over here for your gastro and appointment. Go over here for your hormones and your hormone imbalances, and get your thyroid medication over here. I'm like, how does this all fit together, right? The body is not these series of different parts and pieces, but it really all fits together. And that's the part of, like I said, integrative medicine is viewing the body as a whole, and functional medicine is digging into the root cause. So when I think about approaching all of these different things, or I think about kind of approaching gallbladder disease, of course, conventional medicine, we know how it kind of views things. It goes to relieving gallbladder pain and discomfort through medications, surgeries to remove the gallbladder, whereas I think about what is the root cause of the problem here and approach my treatment strategies from that place. So we're gonna try to save the gallbladder before we actually remove it, because once it's removed, obviously we can't put it back in, right? There's no going back. And then I do see issues kind of really stack up pretty quickly, especially if somebody doesn't have the proper support for what that post gallbladder removal looks like. I support patients with that all the time. So I'm just going to give you guys like high level. Obviously, I am not going to be able to give like specifics for you or your case, but these are things that I want you to think about that you may not get this conversation or education in a conventional medicine standpoint. So when I think about the low down integrative model for gallbladder disease, food is always the first stop. Are you sick of me saying that yet? Probably, but that's because, like, truth be told, food is always the first stop. So there's definitely some things we can do here. So are we going to worsen gallbladder issues if we have blood sugar issues? 100% we will. Insulin as a hormone causes bile to thicken. So if we want to improve bile flow and bile metabolism, we have to keep insulin levels low. So if we have insulin resistance patterns or a lot of blood sugar issues going on because of how we're eating, when we're eating, why we're eating, all of that good, what we're eating, we're going to make those issues worse. So sorry, not sorry, but yes, food is the first stop. So definitely thinking about eating in a way that supports blood sugar balance. If you're not sure what that looks like, Master Your Metabolism Masterclass. I'll touch on that in a second. Circadian rhythm eating. Fancy way of saying like, when are we eating? And how are we distributing our food throughout the day? Because ironically, eating most of your calories at the end of the day, not great from a gallbladder situation, right? So we talk about circadian rhythm eating within Master Your Metabolism Masterclass because it's also a big part of blood sugar balance. Nutrient dense fiber. Fiber can be immensely helpful for bile and bile flow. Bitter foods, right? And you probably think, you're like, I don't even know what a bitter food is, because a lot of times we don't eat them because they taste bitter, right? And so from a human palate, we haven't really grown to evolve to really like love a lot of bitter food. Some people do, but I'm thinking like arugula, endive, radicchio, collard greens, artichoke, citrus zest, even apple cider vinegar is a little bit bitter, right? So you're kind of thinking like, ooh, yeah, that stuff that actually tastes bitter. Bitter foods stimulate gallbladder contraction. Fun fact. So some individuals that are struggling with that, I might have them use some bitter tools and bitter analogs before they eat to help stimulate that bile flow as well too. So that can be very therapeutic. Eliminating processed carbohydrates, womp womp, but we know that that's probably not doing any wonders for us. And then choosing like your cleaner foods, cleaner meats. So some people are ready to kind of adopt more of an organic approach to their eating, sourcing good quality meats from sources that are, grass-fed, grass-finished, making sure that our animals are eating like grass and bugs like they're supposed to. That can really help improve the animal's flavor profile and animal's fat content as well too. So food is always the first stop. If this I question, I'm like, why is this not standard treatment? I mean, like I could just, but it is what it is. I know our system is set up to only be successful in certain avenues. And with that, we just don't have the bandwidth or the capacity or the education of a lot of our medical practitioners to know how to help somebody use food first when they are struggling with some of these early signs of gallbladder deficiency. So food is always the first stop. If you haven't dove into those food first foundations yet and you suspect that you might have some of these bile flow issues like I'm talking about, Master Your Metabolism Masterclass. Click the link in my profile. You can register for that right away. It is a 6-week course that will walk you through all of the foundations of what am I talking about when I say functional nutrition and eating for blood sugar balance. Like, it's a great course that every week builds on itself. There's lots of downloadable guides and recipes, video modules, hours of video modules. So you really, really would benefit from stopping there first. Once we kind of think about food forward, then of course we can always think like lifestyle practices are next. Reducing, these are the not fun ones that nobody wants to hear, but they really work like a charm. Reducing and eliminating excess caffeine and alcohol. We think about the liver, right? The liver has to process all of those things. So that can be a stress on the liver. Optimal hydration, like bile is 95% water. So let's be making sure that we're hydrating ourselves. Some people, like I said, we have to have the conversation around toxin exposure, limiting environmental toxins like pesticides, heavy metals, plastics, chemicals, especially things found in like personal care products, drinking out of plastics, microwaving in plastics, cooking in plastics, fragrances in terms of like laundry care items, cleaning supplies. There's some really good apps out there that make this easy. There's an app called Think Dirty. There's also the Healthy Living app, and they have like a scannable barcode in there where you can actually scan different products throughout your home and kind of see where they stack up in terms of like environmental toxin exposure to those types of things. Also, of course, we're going to be talking to these individuals about opening up drainage and detox pathways. We're thinking about pee, poop, sweat, and breath. Those are the 4 avenues that our body gets stuff out of the body. So if we're struggling with any of those or any of those detox pathways are clogged or stagnant, then that's also going to be an opportunity for us to work on the gallbladder by just helping them open up some drainage and detox pathways too. And then last but not least, and this is in an intentional order of operations, like I don't go after the gut first, but after food forward and lifestyle approach, then we definitely go after the gut, right? We want to think about gut microbiome considerations, test and treat any sort of dysbiosis, support the liver. There's some really therapeutic herbal strategies, whether it's taurine, milk thistle, choline are very therapeutic for liver and liver flow as well. I find good benefit from certain strains of probiotics. There's one called Saccharomyces boulardii that I really use, and I find that to be very helpful. Some lactobacillus probiotic strains, some immunoglobulin support, different binders can also be very helpful, especially if we're experiencing some of those IBS kind of symptoms as well too. So lots of different things depending on that person and what the customized approach is going to be, but I always believe in an integrative and tailored approach to each patient. So even though I threw out some things that I talk about, it's not that everybody does this cookie cutter approach. It's like everybody kind of comes into this experience in a different spot, and we want to meet your body where it's at because that's where it's going to be most successful. So we always want to respect the hormone hierarchy. We want to be bringing the body back together as a whole and a whole unit. So if this, like I said, is something that you feel like, wow, there's lots of different things that can potentially connect to even just digestive system and function, whether it's cholesterol, IBS symptoms, estrogen dominance, skin issues, low vitamin D status, like what's going on, bile, liver, gallbladder, right? And there's layers of the onion. For some people, I have to dig even deeper than dysbiosis, and that's okay. We're here, we're equipped with it, but at least starting with a lot of the foundational pieces. So leaving here today, if, like I said, you don't feel like you have a good food forward foundation, I would start with Master Your Metabolism Masterclass. If you feel like you do have a great food forward foundation, or you just know that for your own style, you appreciate more of a one-on-one support setting, click the link in my bio and sign up for a functional wellness consult. That's where we'll start. That functional wellness consult will allow us to dig into health history, collect labs, and really come up with a more tailored game plan for you to get to where you want to be from a health goals perspective. So no more separating yourself into 50 different parts and pieces and 50 different practitioners. Let's put the body together as a whole and really look at that root cause approach. So if this resonates with you, then you're in the right spot. Welcome to the Lowdown, and we will have more conversations like this next week. So happy Monday and enjoy your week, everyone.